All right, guys, we're going to go through part one of River Valley civilizations. All right, so time and place. Why river valleys? Well, we talked about last week during the Neolithic era, domesticated plants and animals came to the scene. So farming came into the scene. So during the New Stone Age, permanent settlements appeared in river valleys and around the Fertile Crescent. Well, why river valleys? Why would they be there? Well, first and foremost, because it gives us water and rich, fertile soil for agriculture. They began to emerge between 3500 and 500 BCE. All right, and you got your big four. You've got the big four include Mesopotamia, Egyptian civilization, Indus or Indian civilization, and Chinese civilization. Okay, so again, why river valleys? Well, water soil protection. I need you to get that into your head. Water soil protection. Water soil protection. I'll go into detail now. Rivers offered rich, fertile soil for crops. You also, these rivers during flooding seasons provide irrigation water for the land. And locations near river valleys often provided for protection against nomadic peoples, people that still didn't want to settle and wanted to move around from place to place. I would like for you to watch this video that's specific to Mesopotamia, all right, and the first civilization formed at Sumer. Okay, so Mesopotamia, it was located here between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Okay, this green area right here, the light green, that's called the Fertile Crescent that stretches from the Persian Gulf all the way over here to the Med Sea. And what is here in the dark green, that is Mesopotamia. And again, it's between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. Egyptian civilization developed on the lower portion of the Nile. Remember, the Nile flows from south to north. Okay, so this is considered the lower part of the Nile, and it's near the Nile River Delta. The delta is this triangular marshland that's right here. That was one of your vocab terms for this week. Indus civilization emerged along the Indus River in present day Pakistan. Okay, two cities that we're going to talk about next week are going to be Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. So, Indian civilization emerged in southern Asia along the Indus River, and then Chinese civilization emerged over here along the Honghe River. Okay. So these are your majors. These are your big four. You've got the Nile or Egyptian civilization. You've got the Tigris and Euphrates River, give us Mesopotamian civilization, which was the first, right? Indus River gives us Indian civilization, and the Indus civilization stretches all the way over here to the Ganges River, right? And then the Yellow River, the Honghe River, is where Chinese civilization emerges. All right, two smaller groups that are equally important because of their contributions are going to be the Hebrews, today known as the Jews or the Israelites that settled between the Med Sea and the Jordan River Valley. So this little line right here, this is them. This is where they end up settling. And then over here, we have Phoenician colonies. The Phoenicians are going to be known as your sea and river traders. Okay. They are going to give us the alphabet. They are going to give us purple dye. And they are going to make major contributions to world civilizations. We also have patterns of development in these civilizations. They're called the cradles of civilization or the birthplace of civilization. They're the first place where complex urban centers are going to grow, and they're going to create major contributions to the social, political, and economic development of not only their civilization, but civilizations to follow. A big thing within River Valley civilizations, or RVCs as I like to call them, is people began to use metal tools and weapons such as iron and bronze. This is going to make tools we talked about last week make life easier. All right, they're made with a more durable equipment. So it's going to be better. Okay. That this led to agricultural surpluses. An agricultural surplus simply means you have more food than you can eat. Okay, so they had agricultural surpluses due to better tools, plows, and irrigation techniques, meaning they have more food than is needed. And that means not everybody has to farm anymore. You're going to have specializations in labor because, again, not everybody has to be a farmer. You've got more food than necessary. So that person over there can become a blacksmith while I still farm, and I can either trade them or I can sell them my goods in order for a service that they have, in order to buy things from them. All right. Phoenicians began to trade along rivers and by the sea, and we saw those Phoenician colonies on a previous slide. And the world's first cities began to develop because of these increasing agricultural surpluses, led to specializations in labor, led to complex urban centers. All right. But one thing that also took root during this time was the practice of slavery within most ancient cultures began to take on various forms. What that means is if you were a captive from war, they could enslave you. If you owed a debt to someone, you could be enslaved to your debtor. And there was also slavery based on race. We are going to see that with the Israelites. You also have social patterns of development. You had hereditary rulers, meaning the rights to become ruler was passed down from father to son to next male of kin. Um, Hereditary simply means parent to offspring, but in the case of ruler, almost always it was inherited. It was a very patriarchal style of heredity, sorry. That means it passed down from father to son to next male of kin. Examples of your types of hereditary rulers: you had your pharaohs in Egypt, you had dynasties in China or ruling families in China, and you had kings in Mesopotamia. They had very rigid or strict social class systems, meaning what you were born into is what you would pretty much stay into. If you were born into the ruling class, you were a part of the ruling class. If you were born into a poor class within society, you would more than likely stay within that class. Now, your world's first states begin to emerge. You have the evolution of the state that develops. You have a city state that grows into a kingdom that grows even greater to become an empire. And we'll really start talking about empires next week when we talk about the Persians, okay? They also had centralized governments based on religious authorities. What does that mean? Well, priests were the leaders of societies. Pharaohs are viewed as gods. This type of government is called a theocracy. Where religion and politics intersect, that's when you have a theocracy. So, their leaders within their society were very important to their religious structures as well. We also have some of the first written law codes. The Mesopotamian law code was called the Code of Hammurabi, which we are going to get into more detail, like dissecting and looking at that code. The Hebrew moral and religious law code was the Ten Commandments. And when we talk about the Hebrews, we'll also talk about their religious codes. But first and foremost, let's talk about the Code of Hammurabi. Who was Hammurabi? Hammurabi was leader of the Amorites or Old Babylonians. He created an empire in the area that was called Mesopotamia by employing a disciplined army that employed a divide and conquer method to gain control of Sumer, all right, which was within Mesopotamia. All right, He builds a new capital city with the city of Babylon. He assimilated Mesopotamian culture with Sumerian ways to create a larger, stable culture. He was also very interested in state building. So he was a true leader. He wanted to fund irrigation systems to make people's lives better. He wanted to build temples, walled cities for protection, and public buildings. And he encouraged both domestic and foreign trade. This is not the first code of law, but it's the first one to be written down, and it consisted of 228 laws that were carved into steels using cuneiform, which was the Sumerian form of writing. It was a very, very strict system of justice that varied according to their social class. Example, crimes against a member of the upper class or nobility by members of the lower class or a commoner was punished more severely than the same offense against a member of the lower class. So if you were in the upper class, you were pretty golden unless you did something to another member of the upper class, because that's where we get the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This principle applies to social equals, meaning if a nobility knocks the eye of another nobility out, then that member of the nobility that had his eye knocked out can knock out the other guy's eye. And vice versa. But now you have a commoner that knocks the eye out of a nobility, their punishment would be death. Okay. So governors of an area, this is the responsibility of public officials. Governors of an area of a city were expected to catch criminals. Listen to this. Failure to do so meant that the officials had to replace property or pay damages to the victims and their families. This was done out of the governor's own pocket. So there was a very, very strong sense of having to catch criminals so that the governor didn't pay the repercussions. All right. So what they wanted to do was weed out criminals within society. All right. If you're a soldier, if you're a young man, you're expected to serve in the army. Okay. If you hired a substitute to take your place, you would be put to death. And then the substitute would be given full control over your estate. All right, this is one that kind of hits close to home for me because my husband's a contractor. Okay, builders were responsible for the buildings they constructed. If a building collapsed or killed a family member of the builder was also killed. Okay, laws surrounded renting and owning farmland were also within the code, as well as irrigation laws because of the geography of Mesopotamia. All right, interest rates on loans were watched very closely. If a lender raised his interest rates after the loan was made, the lender lost the entire amount of the loan. All right, what does that mean? That means if I loan you money, if I loan you $20 and I say, hey, at the end of the week, you're going to pay me back 30. So just to make it fair, to make it even. And then the end of the week comes and I say, hey, you owe me 50. I can't do that, or I would lose the entire amount that I loaned out to you. You also have wage restrictions for different key laborers, meaning you can't charge above this, or you can't charge, or you can't be paid below this. Marriage and family laws. Many of you are going to have a hard time with this. It was the largest category of laws within their society. Okay, that means they valued it. They viewed marriage as something of importance. All right, parents were to arrange marriages for their children. And when they were arranged, both parties were to sign a formal marriage contract. This consisted of a bridal payment by the husband, as well as a dowry paid by the bride's father to the husband. All right? The role of women. Women were child bearers. Okay, they took care of the home. They had very little in the way of legal rights once they married. They had some business rights, but not many. When the husband died, his property was transferred directly to his wife, and the wife had the right to distribute the property as inheritance to her children as she saw fit. So you got to be good to mama and daddy, right? Divorce. The man had the most power over divorce. The woman was expected to fulfill her duties at home as a wife and a mother. Okay, or else the husband could divorce her and keep the dowry paid by the bride's family. However, if the woman had done nothing wrong and could prove it, then she could have the dowry returned. But in this day and age, they do not have cell phones. All they have is word of mouth. Okay, so it was very hard for them to prove that they had done nothing wrong, right? Men were allowed to have affairs outside of their marriage. Women were not. Women could receive a pardon from her husband, but women who committed adultery were killed. Okay. Parents had total rights over their children, and obedience was demanded. Okay. Parents could not disinherit their children arbitrarily. That means without cause. So they couldn't keep the family lands from them. There had to be without reason. There had to be a reason. And it needed to be brought before a court of law before you could disinherit them. All right. Here are some of the codes which we're going to look into more on Monday. But it says if a builder builds a house for a man and does not make its construction sound, and the house which he has built collapses and causes the death of the owner of the house, the builder will be put to death. And over here on the right, you see a Sumerian ziggurat, all right, or a Mesopotamian ziggurat. This is a temple, okay? Next, you have if a sister of God or nun who is not living in a convent opens a wine shop or enters a wine shop for a drink, they shall burn that woman. This is another one. If a man be in debt and is unable to pay his creditors, he shall sell his wife, son, or daughter, or bind them over to service. For 3 years they shall work in the house of their purchaser or master, and in the 4th year they shall be given their freedom. So if your dad's bad with money, he's in a lot of debt, he could sell you or your mom, okay? Or yeah. If bad characters gather in the house of a wine cellar, and she does not arrest those characters and bring them to the palace, that wine cellar shall be put to death. If the woman has not been careful, but has gadded about, neglecting her house and belittling her husband, they shall throw that woman into the water. So if a woman is out talking bad about her husband and she's not cooking and cleaning, they can throw her into the river. It's terrible, terrible. If a man takes in his own home a young boy as a son and rears him, so raises him, one may not bring claim for that adopted son. So what this one is saying is he is your son. Like if you take a child in, you raise them as your own, nobody can come and take claim for him. If a son strikes his father, they shall cut off his hand. Whew, it's rough. All right, now listen to this one. If anyone brings an accusation against a man, and the accused go to the river and leap into the river, if he sink in the river, his accuser shall take possession of his house. But if the river prove that the accused is not guilty, and he escape unhurt, then he who had brought the accusation shall be put to death, while he who leapt into the river shall take possession of the house that had belonged to his accuser. So don't be making false accusations. Right? I think a lot of you might be wondering at this time, why is it the river? Why is it the river? Well, many of them believed that elements of nature, right, were gods. Okay? So if they throw someone into the river and they sink and they drown, then guess what? The gods say that they were wrong. But if the person gets out unharmed, doesn't drown, then the gods are trying to tell you that that man or woman is innocent. All right, religious patterns we'll get to next week. Thanks you guys so much for watching, and sorry I had to pause a couple times. Recording with my daughter here. Thanks, you guys. Bye.